I'm going to clarify by starting out the video by saying I wish this guy the best of luck, and that I have no hard feelings towards him, but if there is one quarterback in college football who has honestly abused the transfer portal, it has got to be TJ Finley. I've been hearing about TJ Finley for quite some time now, as I remember when he was the developmental quarterback prospect for LSU in the class of 2020 alongside Max Johnson. Finley got an opportunity to play a little bit as a freshman, and then the saga really started for him. From there, he played at 3 more schools, which included stops at Auburn, Texas State, Western Kentucky, and now Tulane. This guy will have played at 5 different schools in 6 years, and honestly I'm not sure how it's possible, but apparently it is. In today's video, I'm going to introduce you to a player who has abused the portal, and we're going to talk about what happened to TJ Finley. How on earth did he become a big-time quarterback recruit? How has he played at 5 different schools, and how will he do this upcoming season? We're going to take a look and examine all of that, but before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about TJ Finley. Speaking of madness, it is that time of year again, as March has now come around, and honestly, there is just so much noise always going on. Whether that's due to life circumstances or a pig that's being obnoxious in the backseat of a Geico car, the sponsor of today's video, Raycon, has you covered, especially their everyday earbuds. As someone who listens to a ton of music and loves to go on walks, they have the perfect features for me. They have active noise cancellation, which is capable of drowning out the most maddening of sounds, and they are also perfect for the gym, work, phone calls, or literally anything else you do, like watch my videos. To make things even better, their latest model will truly seemingly last forever. The battery life is over 32 hours, and if somehow you go through that quickly, in just 10 minutes of charging, you'll get 90 minutes of battery life. They do come in a ton of colors, but personally, the black ones have worked absolutely perfect for me, and as I said, someone who goes for walks all the time, this is just absolutely perfect for my day-to-day life. Again, not only does it have a long battery, but it also cancels noise, and they just feel great. It doesn't hurt to wear them. So to wrap things up, I don't want you guys to miss out on this deal, especially when you're trying to deal with all these annoying March Madness commercials. If you want to get a pair today though, and be sure to go to buyraycon.com/Fisher to get 20% off your best-selling everyday earbuds. Once again, that is buyraycon.com/FISHER for 20% off. Thank you to Raycon for supporting and sponsoring today's video. In order to understand how Finley got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He ended up stepping off the bus at Ponchatoula High School, and he walked to midfield. At the time, he was listed as a 6'6", 233-pound quarterback and was one of the largest kids in the Little League football fields. Instead of playing on the offensive line, Finley's first coach noticed his arm talent and told him to throw the ball as far as possible. Finley was a quarterback ever since he was 10 years old, and he tossed to the varsity team during summer drills. This was a familiar place for the young quarterback, who at the time was just an 8th grader in Louisiana. He had played many games in that field, as he had guided the team to a district championship the season earlier, and his home was on that field. When Finley transferred to Ponchatoula after spending his first year at St. Thomas Aquinas, it had run the option offense for years under their head coach. That coach said, quote, "My bullheaded self, we were going to run the option with a 6'6" throwing prodigy. We tried to run the option for about 5 weeks, and we were going backwards, and we were getting TJ killed. So we switched to an offense that was more suited to him." Finley had the arm and the athletic potential to be a big name, and Les Miles first offered him a scholarship as an 8th grader. I couldn't find a lot of details on his early years. Finley dreamed of playing at LSU since he was 8 years old, and became the first quarterback from his high school to sign with the state's premier football program. During an unofficial visit to LSU in May of 2018, TJ Finley sat inside Ed Orgeron's office. Orgeron explained that his offensive coordinator wanted to create an explosive spread offense with multiple receivers. This is not what LSU typically did. Orgeron wanted LSU to meet its lofty standards each and every game, and Orgeron would offer Finley a scholarship that day, and he soon gave LSU his verbal commitment. At the time, he was a 3-star recruit and committed to LSU in the spring of 2018. He was only a sophomore in high school and had stuck with the Tigers ever since. Despite that, and a relatively lower ranking, he had offers from Oregon, Alabama, and Auburn. Unfortunately, with the quarterback position, physical gifts aren't always a recipe for quarterback success and are a mere luxury compared to anything else. Finley was obviously a physical freak, as he was tall, athletic, bulky, and had a cannon for an arm, but could he figure it out at the next level? That was something that was to be determined. Finley's high school stats were definitely concerning, as typically you don't find weaknesses on highlight tapes, but from what many saw was available, he had the ability to make impressive plays, but he had bad production. He completed under 50% of his passes, which is really bad, and had a lot of trouble on a down-to-down basis. But physically, he checked all the boxes. Some were worried that he wouldn't be able to make it at LSU. As one LSU beat writer said, quote, "The SEC is a completely different animal, and it's hard to see him suddenly figuring it out against stiff competition in such a crowded quarterback room. That said, he really does have an impressive arm, and he can put some cool stuff on a highlight tape. With that physical makeup, he could also be a candidate to a change to defensive end or tight end if he gets too buried on the depth chart." But, as I said, he had high highs and low lows. Against Denham Springs, he had one of the greatest individual performances in Louisiana prep football history, as he went 26 of 39 for 601 yards and 7 touchdowns, and also ran for 2 more. For good measure, he scored on a 2-point conversion, which decided the outcome, and he accounted for 56 total points. This was crazy. His coach said, quote, "He's probably closer to 6'7" than 6'6". His football IQ is off the charts. He's a very competitive kid, and he really likes to work. I think it's a great fit, and he's going to play quarterback at LSU." Some are comparing him to both Jamarcus Russell and Randall Cunningham, as that would be his body type and also his type of arm strength. During his 3-year career, Finley ended up throwing for 59 touchdowns and 6,500 yards, and he broke records at the school that'll never be touched, according to his coach. According to 24/7 Sports, Finley was a 3-star recruit, the number 19 pro-style quarterback, and the 486th best player in the class of 2020. So how would he do at LSU alongside incoming 4-star Max Johnson? Well, let's take a look. Well, at one point, Finley was somewhat of the future of LSU's football team, as early on in the year, Miles Brennan had taken over as the starter. The previous 2 years were held by Joe Burrow, so there was a ridiculous high standard for LSU Tigers quarterbacks. In week 3, Brennan ended up getting hurt against Mizzou, and all of a sudden, it would come down to their 2 true freshman quarterbacks in TJ Finley and Max Johnson. Finley would eventually get a nod as he'd make his first career start against South Carolina. In that game, Finley would go 17 of 21 with 3 total touchdowns and a win over the Gamecocks. This was great. But things were brought back down to reality, as the following weekend, he ended up having 2 interceptions and a blowout loss on the road against Auburn. Finley would bounce back with the best game of his LSU career, though, throwing for 271 yards and 2 touchdowns in a road victory over Arkansas. So far, he was 2-3 as a starter, but ultimately, he would eventually get benched. He played terribly against A&M with 2 interceptions and got blown out by number 1 Alabama. That led LSU to throwing in Max Johnson instead, and Johnson led them to that famous shoe toss win in the Swamp, and also took over as the starter for the next couple of years. All of a sudden, Finley had played solid as a freshman, but didn't do enough. He said his confidence was fleeing and he was doubting his abilities, and more than anything, he was just tired of the constant change, and he said he felt he lacked consistency and structure. When he had signed there, Joe Brady was the team's passing coordinator, and all of a sudden everything had changed. Some thought he was running from competition when he decided to enter the portal, but he had immediate interest from programs like Auburn, Bama, Mississippi State, and even Texas A&M, and even schools like Michigan and Penn State. But he said he was just trying to find the right fit and was not necessarily running from competition. He did end up going to other schools that had good quarterbacks as well. Eventually, TJ would decide to pick Auburn, and he was not afraid of competition. In fact, he'd be stuck behind Bo Nix, who was the future of the program, so if anything, he picked a worse position to go to than being at LSU, who just had Max Johnson coming off of a couple of games. While at Auburn, Finley actually got a couple of opportunities. In week 3, Nix got hurt, and Finley had to lead him down the field, and actually went 9 of 16 for 97 yards, and had a game-winning touchdown, which was pretty crazy. But as Nix would come back, all of a sudden Finley would have to go back to the sidelines. But near the end of the season, Finley would start their last 3 games, as he would then have 1 touchdown and a loss to South Carolina, and then had that crazy performance against Alabama. The Tide were trying to make it to the national championship game that year, and they had to get through a pesky Auburn team. TJ Finley looked bruised and battered and hurt, but he found a way to keep them in, and the game went to 4 overtimes. Ultimately, Bama won 24-22, but Finley had 2 touchdowns along the way. He ended up starting their bowl game against Houston as well, having a touchdown in that one. Ultimately, Auburn would decide to come back with Bo Nix in 2022, and after throwing for 800 yards and 7 total touchdowns, but as I said, he would be the backup in 2022 with Nix as the guy. He would have a touchdown in their Week 1 game against Mercer, and also appeared in games against San Jose State, Penn State, and Ole Miss, but playing time was hard to come by. In total, Finley had 400 yards with 1 touchdown and 4 picks. Not very good numbers. Finley would then decide to enter the portal for the second time, and ultimately decided to go to Texas State. He went back down to the group of 5 level, where he could immediately start, and G.J. Kinney got the most out of him. Texas State had a breakout season, and Finley was a big reason for that. He had 4 touchdowns in their Week 1 road victory over Baylor, and then continued to have good stats. He led them to wins over Jackson State, Nevada, and Southern Miss, and all of a sudden, Finley was starting to look like a good quarterback again. They ended up losing 4 of their last 8 games, but Finley had a couple of noteworthy performances. He had 5 touchdowns in a win over Georgia Southern, had 3 touchdowns against Arkansas State, 3 against South Alabama, and then would lead them to the First Responders Bowl, where they would beat Rice. In total, Finley had saved his career, throwing for 3,439 yards with 24 touchdowns and 8 interceptions to go along with 5 more scores on the ground. So he had played at 3 schools in 4 years now, but he decided he was going to mix things up again. Western Kentucky had been known for developing quarterbacks and sending them off to the NFL, as recently they had both Bailey Zappi and Austin Reed, so Finley was hoping to be the next one in line. He decided to transfer over to WKU, but things did not go according to plan for him. He would be named the Week 1 starter, but he'd have to rematch against Alabama. This was now going to be the 4th time that he ended up playing against Bama, and Finley got no better. He ended up going 18 of 31 for 92 yards and 2 interceptions, and they couldn't even score a point. They lost 63-0. In Week 2, he'd play against Eastern Kentucky, throwing for 1 touchdown and 351 yards, before then being lost for the season after beating Middle Tennessee State on the road. Honestly, this was super sad, as he had a lower leg injury in that game against the Blue Raiders and took to social media after surgery and said, quote, "I'll be back." He ended up throwing for 490 yards and a touchdown through his first 3 games, and he was once again looking formidable. Caden Veldkamp would take over for the remainder of the season, and all of a sudden, TJ Finley was once again the afterthought. This was now going to be the 3rd time at 3 different schools where he was passed up by someone else on the depth chart. Veldkamp had a good season, so Finley has now decided to spend 1 more year in college football, and that will be at the Tulane Green Wave. Just like WKU, the Green Wave have been producing some good quarterbacks over the last couple of years. Michael Pratt was one of the best quarterbacks in American Athletic Conference history and went off to the NFL. Darian Mensah blew up as a true freshman last year and ended up deciding to sign with Duke in the transfer portal for a hefty NIL paycheck. Tulane right now is one of the sexiest Group of 5 programs, and Finley will likely take over as the immediate starter, as former 5-star from Oregon, Ty Thompson, couldn't really get things going. Finley will bring plenty of experience to the table, as this will now literally be his 5th school in 6 years. In 5 years, TJ has passed for 6,200 yards and 37 touchdowns, and has appeared in 34 total games. He also has 8 more rushing scores. As I said, Tulane now has an empty quarterback room, and Finley should take over as the starter. But before you think the story is over, it actually gets 100,000 times crazier. Somehow, someway, TJ Finley has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He has this season and next season. Finley's not going away anytime soon, as he will end up being one of those 7th-year quarterbacks. He was part of that class of 2020, had a red shirt, dealt with an injury, and all of a sudden, this guy is going to be playing in college football forever. On one hand, I think he has totally abused the transfer portal and epitomizes what is wrong with college football, as he's been at 5 schools in 4 years, but on the other hand, in a more charitable viewpoint, he's been replaced and has never really gotten a chance to play a full season yet. Besides that 1 year at Texas State, he's either passed over twice, got benched, or got hurt. Despite playing all this time, Finley really hasn't played all that much football, so I do hope for him to succeed this upcoming fall at Tulane, and hopefully he can save his career, and maybe develop into an NFL quarterback. I think that's probably not likely, but I want to see the guy succeed. What do you guys think though? If you're a fan of one of the 5 schools Finley has played at, let me know your thoughts on Finley down below, and let me know another portal player who's been around forever I should do a feature on next. Before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.